Hello and what is up, YouTube and readers of my amazing blog. This video is going to accompany my latest article on how to analyze and optimize your Next.js production build. And everyone who's watching this probably knows Next.js is a popular React framework. Right here for production. Next.js gives you the best developer experience with all the features you need for production. Hybrid, static, and server rendering, which is very cool. TypeScript support, smart bundling, root prefetching, and more. No config needed. So yeah, Next has a lot of cool stuff that comes with it. We're going to be more focusing on kind of the smart bundling in this video. Kind of talking about when you build your React application, Next is going to take everything and bundle it into chunks of JavaScript. And then those chunks are going to be loaded into the browser when they're needed, essentially, based on how you've set up the imports in your app and the different packages you're using, in addition to Next built-in packages, which will be there anyways. So Next is going to bundle the production application using Webpack for the best optimal page load times, etc., in the browser. So the idea is keeping that load time down, the initial amount of JavaScript any page needs at a minimum, where you still have all the functionality that you want in your page, but you don't have as much sheer size of files, which increases loading time and can affect performance negatively. It's one aspect of that. And I think most people know, and if you don't know, now you know, that Google has come out with a new page experience metric, and that includes the core web vitals, things like largest contentful paint, time to first input. These things will play somewhat of a role, although Google does claim that it's not a primary role and that things like load time do not directly affect rank. However, they can when there's pages of similar relevance. So you'll find a quote in my article. You can learn more there. So basically this video, we're just going to walk through the actual how to optimize a build process, and we're going to use this actual blog as an example. And Next comes with some tools that already optimize it. They come with some tools that will help us optimize it, and we can even get some additional tools that will help us analyze and optimize our build. So the first step, assuming you have an Next.js application, of course. If you don't have one, why are you watching this video? Stop. Or if you're not planning on one. So boom, install something called Next Bundle Analyzer and another package called Cross env. You'll install those, and that will give you the ability to add a new script to your package JSON file. You can call it whatever you want. I'm calling it analyze, and I'm using cross env to inject this environment variable into the production context dynamically, and then I'm just going to run next build. And there's some magic file called next.config.js, and that's just, you may be able to infer this from the file name, but it's a configuration for your Next.js app. And you can have a lot of different things in here, but you want to bring in this function here, and this is where you're reading that environment variable we injected and only using the bundle analyzer when that equals true. And the first thing to do is you need to know where you're at before you can do anything. So we're going to run our new script and build our application, assuming there are no errors that should build. And hopefully that won't take too long, but as it builds, it will also, since we're using the analyze version, it's also going to pop up those right on cue. It's going to pop up analyzing visualizations for both your client and your server. They're going to give you even more insight into what's going on in terms of the bundles, the different chunks of JavaScript we talked about, and relative size of how much each dependency or each page is taking up, depending on if you're looking at the client or the server. And you can even, it's really cool. So right now we're looking at the client, and I've left in some work for us to do. But real quick, before we look at those visualizations, Next even provides us with terminal feedback. So, Webpack, there were some issues, whatever, that's not important. What's important down here are these first load JS numbers. And red, as we know, is historically not a good color to be using when we're talking about values here. And Next is going to code these. Let me make that a little bigger. They have a red, yellow, green system. And right now, basically, Next is telling us, hey, you've got too big of files, too big of chunks loading for all of these. And pay special attention to this first load JS shared by all. This is basically Next is smart enough to put all the stuff that every page needs in its own bundle. And then, in addition to that, on each individual page, it will get other bundles with different chunks of code that only that page specifically needs. So, first idea would be, okay, let's make that shared pack or that shared bundle smaller. And if we make that shared bundle smaller, we can actually make every page a little smaller. So it's a good starting point. Okay, so this is really cool, and you can like zoom in and it's crazy. It's a really good visualization. You can see like right down to the nitty gritty of each kind of dependency. This stuff over here has a lot to do with markdown parsing. It's like, refactor. That's part of what takes markdown and turns it into my blog, turns it into HTML. So you can even zoom in and see. This is for code highlighting. So these are the different languages of code that I have special syntax highlighting for my blog. And you can see each one, you hover it, you get a little tooltip with different stuff, how big it is, the path, the name of the file, etc., etc. And then you can see on the server side when you kind of see what each sort of page is taking up from a server side point of view. And basically what we need to do is look for areas we can improve in. So I've intentionally left in some stuff that we could get rid of. So there's a few different things we can get rid of. Basically, oh my god, look at this. This is a package called Moment that handles date formatting and other date functions. Here it is over here again. So it's got all these internationalization things. It's the second biggest thing in our client, the second biggest chunk. It's got another chunk over there that's big. We got to do something about that. That's just out of control. Too big. Maybe we can find something, a better, more optimized package we can use. A lot of times what happens is these older legacy libraries were built so long ago and they were great at one point, and then something has come along like tree shaking or the module syntax ES 2020 or ES 2018, whatever it came out, ES 6, new stuff came out and what they had kind of became obsolete, but they couldn't go back. It had already been a dependency of a million applications, and so they're left with these big things that don't work well with this new kind of bundling. So you can really see these right off the bat. So we can get rid of that, and so you go to your code and you download a different library that did the same thing for you. In this case, I'm going to get rid of moment. Get rid of moment like it never existed. And I'm going to use a different library called datefns, date functions. Another thing you can look for is like, oh, this Cloudinary core is kind of big, and in this case, all I'm using it for is to build one URL. Maybe I can code that myself. Maybe I don't need that after all. I thought I did, but it turns out, wait a second, it's really not doing that much. I'm sure it's great. I use Cloudinary to serve all the images on my blog, but do I really need this if all I'm using it is for one little thing? No, probably not is the answer. So I can get rid of that. And just get rid of the imports. Get rid of where I use it. And write my own code instead. I'm just using it to blur. I'm just using it to make images blurry when the page loads. Just as like a little loading thing. Blurry, not blurry. That's all that was doing, was creating a URL for a blurry image. And Cloudinary core. So we'll remove unneeded dependencies. And another thing you can do is you can work with something called the dynamic import in Next. And this is really going to save a lot of your bundle size. This is really going to dynamically, you can forcibly, it's almost like lazy loading a component where we're only going to bring that component in when Next determines that we need it, basically when it appears on the screen or when it's being used. So we can take a look, and the way I structured this, I have like a big layout component that includes my navigation, the search bar, it includes the footer at the bottom of the page, it includes this little button, it includes this contact form, and a lot of those things like the footer and all that other stuff, that's not needed at page load, and I can use this dynamic component or this dynamic module to import this component only when it's needed. And there's a very simple syntax for that. You just bring in dynamic from Next Dynamic and make a dynamic component that you just make a call to this import, and you can even specify custom loading components as a second argument to it. Really quite cool. So it's just a matter of choosing. In this case, I'm gonna have I have a search here. I have a search, this drop down, I don't need that drop down until it's absolutely necessary that someone even searches for something. So I can make that a dynamic component, import dynamic. And really just get rid of the old version. Hope this one I actually just did. I hope it doesn't backfire when I try to build it. All the other ones I've already done and tested. But I said, oh, I could do one more. And we just go through and bring back the dynamic stuff. And at least comment out bring back our dynamic stuff. And bring back our dynamic stuff and comment out all our non-dynamic stuff. Or just remove them all together, really. But just to speed things up a little bit, I'm just going to comment them out for now and go back later. And go back later and deal with them officially. Here's a layout component. Boom, I've got 4 different things I'm bringing in dynamically that I do not need when the page first loads. Like I don't need that contact, I don't need the progress bar, I don't need the footer, I don't need the little back to top button on the initial page load. That's just silly. Who needs that when the page first loads? And I've even experimented a little bit with dynamically loading things that like are needed, and it seems to load really fast, like almost unnoticeably. But I don't want to push it too far. But it's fun to play around with. So there are a few things. Maybe I think I've got one more yet. My home page had a couple as well. And I'll bring those back. Bring the dynamic back. Maybe, oh, there's a couple more in here. Turns out there was actually quite a few of these. Oh my gosh. And one thing to keep an eye on is how many different blocks do we have in our visualization in the beginning, and how many blocks do we get in the end? You should see a lot more big blocks of code in the end. So kind of keep an eye on that. It's like, okay, we've got this many blocks here. How many are we going to have? You can count them up. I counted mine up for my initial build. I think I had like 14, and then I ended up with 41. I documented it in the it's all documented in the blog article. So this is, you basically audit your whole entire application like this. And it's just a matter of converting everything you think you can dynamically import, make it be a dynamic component, go through, and just stick dynamic in front of it. I think that's the easiest syntax to use. That way you can just quickly come back through and change stuff back and forth. Of course, bring that in. Oh, we got an error in the home component. Landing. Oh, we still need that. That is not dynamic. That is a good example. That landing is something I did not make dynamic. So that's above the fold. So that's the visible part of the page when it loads. So I'm leaving that to be loaded right away as opposed to dynamic. So I think we got it. So now we'll try to rebuild the application and see what happens. Hopefully, fingers crossed, I didn't make a mistake in real time here. We'll know in a second if I did, and I guess it's not the end of the world. But right away, you can see that there are a ton more little chunks everywhere. The little chunks are everywhere. And, you know, that whole entire big chunk, that was that moment library is gone. That Cloudinary Core library is gone. I've got some of these visualization, they're like D3 visualizations. They take up a little room, but they load on their own only when they're needed. And we've got all these little tiny chunks of different stuff over here. You still have the big chunk because that markdown parsing and whatever your app is doing on every page, you know, it's going to have a big chunk here and there. That's okay, because you can always refer back to your statistics and you can see, boom, everything is now in the green, and we brought stuff down from like over 400 first load kilobytes, 397, 243 to 117. So it's more than we more than cut it in half by doing all those tricks, and you should see this reflect in the loading times, any metrics you run. And all that boils down to is a better experience for the users of your page, and just another thing in your skill set, because it does affect so many things, from your ranking and organic to users' overall experience to just saying, look, I know what I'm doing. That, you know, if you're going to do something, you might as well do it to the best of your ability. And that pretty much concludes this video. It went on a lot longer than I thought. Switching all those dynamic components back again, I probably could have made that a little bit quicker or stopped the video, but I didn't feel like that. So I hope you got something out of this, and sign up for my newsletter where you'll get exclusive tips, tricks, and courses will be coming soon. So stay tuned for those while I figure out what I did to my site to break it in the meantime. Alright, take care. We'll see you next time.